looking at the major poems in the Torah to see what they're all about. We quickly saw that these poems are important to the entire structure of the Torah. At the end of every major section, a character gives a poem, much like how in a musical, characters break out into song at important moments in the story. And these poems are all filled with similar themes. They all build on God's poetic promise to send a rescuer to eradicate evil and crush the enemy, but who will do so at great cost to himself.
So Jacob's poem painted this image of a mighty eternal king descending from the tribe of Judah who will crush his enemies. And the imagery he associates with this king is a lion. Then Joseph is connected to a really important image, the shepherd, the stone of Israel. Let's see how all these images are blended together into one person in Balaam and Moses' poems.
At the very end of the Torah in his farewell address, Moses gives a blessing to the tribes of Israel and tells them what's going to happen to them in the last days, just like Jacob blessed his sons at the end of Genesis. In Moses' poem, unlike Jacob, he doesn't spend much time on Judah at all. This time he focuses on Joseph.
Moses blesses Joseph with all of the best or choice things in the whole world. Everything in heaven, earth, and the depths of the ocean will belong to the person that Moses calls the head of Joseph and the prince among his brothers. You might expect such a promise to be for the eternal king who will come from Judah, but Moses promises it to Joseph. And more than that, in Jacob's poem, Judah was given the imagery of a lion, but Joseph didn't get an animal. Now in Moses' poem, Joseph is associated with two animals, two different types of oxen. Moses is talking about someone that he calls the head of Joseph, the prince among his brothers, and he says this about him. A firstborn shore, he has majesty, and his horns are the horns of the auroch. The shore and the auroch are two different types of oxen, but do you notice anything about this?
Yeah. Earlier in the Torah, Moses gave very specific instructions about the firstborn of every shore. Every firstborn shore is sacrificed. It's the only animal where the firstborn has to be sacrificed without exception. Moses doesn't just call him a shore, he specifically calls him the firstborn shore.
Exactly. So now Moses is saying that this head of Joseph will be some sort of sacrifice, but he also calls him an auroch. An auroch is an extinct type of oxen, but it was one of the absolute biggest and most terrifying animals during biblical times. In the Bible, it's always associated with an untamable, victorious person.
So Jacob gave Judah's descendant imagery of a kingly lion crushing the enemies. And now Moses gives the head of Joseph the imagery of an ox who will be sacrificed, and an untamable wild ox, and describes him as a prince who is distinguished from his brothers.
Right. And let's look at how another poet interpreted the story. In Numbers 24, we learn that the Spirit of God came upon a man named Balaam, and he started talking about Israel. Then he shifts to one specific king from Israel, and this is what he says about that one king from Israel. And his king shall be higher than Agag, and his kingdom shall be exalted. God brings him out of Egypt. He is for him like the horns of the auroch. He will devour the nations who are his adversaries, and will crush their bones, and smash them with his arrows. He crouches, he lies down like a lion, and like a lioness who dares to rouse him. Blessed is everyone who blesses you, and cursed is everyone who curses you. Speaking about a king, he uses imagery of an ox.
That's Joseph imagery from Moses' poem.
Speaking of the same king, he says he will crush his enemies with arrows.
Crushing the enemy is from God's poem about the rescuer, and Jacob's poem about Judah. But the arrows are from Jacob's poem about Joseph.
Speaking about the same king, he says he crouches like a lion who dares to rouse him.
That is copy and pasted from Jacob's poem about the eternal king from Judah.
Balaam's poem combines the imagery that Jacob applied to Judah with the imagery Moses applied to Joseph.
Why?
Balaam's poem makes it abundantly clear to us that these poems aren't about two different descendants. They're all giving us imagery about what to expect from this one future rescuer that God promised way back in the beginning. When we look at all three poems together in light of the story, this is the picture we're given. The picture of a mighty eternal king, like a lion, who will descend from Judah, who we can learn about by reading Joseph's story. He's a king who will be sacrificed like a firstborn shore ox, yet also victorious like the massive auroch ox, and everything in heaven and earth will belong to him.
Wow, okay, let's recap. The poems show us that the events in the Torah are about the future, because the poets tell us they're interpreting how these events foreshadowed the future. And the poems teach us how God plans to restore what humanity lost when they chose evil over him. And God's plan, according to the poetry, is raising up a king from the tribe of Judah who will be like Joseph, bring him out of Egypt, just like he did with the Israelites. This individual will be a sacrifice that is rejected and attacked. Even though he's sacrificed, he'll be victorious over evil, crushing the serpent, crushing all his enemies to the ends of the earth, and everything will be given to him as his inheritance. And he'll be distinguished among his brothers.